it should be as imperfect as possible. It should be something like a child's play.
Welcome to the Pixel Paper Podcast, a series where we get to know the creative processes behind up-and-coming digital artists. My name is Noor, graphic designer and work-in-progress artist, and I'll be your host for this series. Sharing his childlike characters on Instagram has been a way for our first guest to process his overthinking. Anand dives deep into the thoughts behind his work and unpacks the story of his famous Apupa characters, as well as sharing his inspirations and his feelings towards the creative process, giving us a different way of seeing things. So sit back, get comfy, and enjoy. Hi Anand, thank you for being here.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
No problem. So for the benefit of our audience, could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Anand Krishnan, and I am a graphic designer and an illustrator based out of this place called Palakkad in Kerala.
Cool. Thank you. The reason I wanted to interview you for the benefit of the people listening is because I've been following you for a really long time and I love your work. He has a really simple style, but it's very meaningful. Could you just tell us a bit more about your work?
I got a lot of responses was towards my comics. So I think maybe I will speak to that. So these characters actually, it has a very funny origin story, as I would like to call it. So I was in Hyderabad at the time and I was working for a client. I had to come up with a design for a brochure for an educational program for kids. And I have had this deadline for like about a month. And I kept making on these concepts and none of them was working. It was the last week and I had to like really give the client something, otherwise I was going to be in trouble. I was at her place and then I noticed a lot of these toys and these educational materials. So I thought, why can't I make use of these materials and then, come up with a concept? And I decided to stay and I started clicking pictures of these toys and learning materials and all of that. And then I had to somehow connect these pictures together and form a book. And that's why I decided, all these pictures and all these toys and materials are so random. I need something to kind of, connect them together. That's when these characters came in my mind and I drew these characters doing stuff together. My client also liked it and she decided to go ahead with the design. But then it wasn't the same characters that you see in my comics. It was slightly different. Over time, I kind of started drawing these characters everywhere, wherever I go. Like I'm in a coffee shop and drawing these characters on the table, which I got scolded for many times. And then I started drawing these characters on walls and sketchbooks. And they weren't really saying anything at that point. Then I started giving them a voice, like what would they talk about? One day I decided that, let me try posting a story. And then I did it and a few of my friends really liked it. And then they were like, you should, keep making more of them. And I did. That's how these comics started. And they're all stories, kind of anxieties and overthinking and stuff that I do. I guess these comics are also a way for me to kind of make the situation less complex for me as well, but when I'm putting it out and then people are seeing it, they would just have a smile in their mind and I feel good about that, so that's the story with these characters.
Okay, that's cool. So essentially, because you procrastinated so much for your deadline, these characters were born.
Yeah, you could say that.
That's cool. So you mentioned that a lot of the stories that you tell through these characters is like personal stories. So is it a way almost like therapy?
I guess so, yeah. It is sort of like a therapy for me because like most of these stories start with an experience that I've had. a conflict or an anxious thought, we never really think of like an alternative, right? We always think of how everything is going to end and, doomsday and all of that. But I guess these comics are for me to kind of look the other way, other possibilities. And you can see this as an entirely different thing altogether.
I would say like your style is pretty minimalistic. Most of your comics, I can see they're black and white. So what drove you towards this style of work, and how did you get to the point where you're comfortable with this aesthetic?
So I never really saw it as a minimalistic art, or that I wanted to do, minimal characters. If you notice the characters, right, they're very imperfect. They all have jagged lines and very organic, and it almost feels like a kid has made a doodle. And I feel like that makes these characters very relatable to the human experience, because it's not always so perfect, right? And that is how I wanted to portray the stories too. I mean, I could have that and, designed the character with precise, I don't know, measurements and anatomy and color and depth and all of that. But I don't know, like it just didn't appeal to me. I felt like it should be as imperfect as possible. It should be something like a child's play. All this was running in the back of my head. I never really sat and designed a whole lot of characters for these comics. It took birth in a very natural way. I never really iterated much. And sometimes I feel like as I am making more comics, the characters are changing in certain ways. Like it's not always the same. Like it appears the same, but when I'm drawing it, it kind of feels different. And I feel like that is like the beauty of this character as well. And that in a way kind of talks about how we are as humans doing a lot of mistakes and learning.
That sounds really great, because I think from what I'm understanding is that these characters just evolved from a place of intuition. They kind of just came out of you. You didn't think about it.
Yeah, it was an accident, I would say. Like I never really wanted to make comics. I remember when I was in my design school, I wanted to make things all perfect, colors and anatomy and everything. This is like a complete opposite to that. I used to not like it, but now this is a story, and I don't know, I quite like this process more than what I was in design school.
That's really interesting. So you mentioned you went to design school. So do you think that your skills that you've learned in design school have affected your art and how you view it?
Of course, I joined design school after my 12th. Till that point of time, it was a very traditional and conservative system that I've gone through. And my our design school, which is DJ Academy of Design, gave me a space to kind of, think for myself and what I want to do. I guess all of that had a lot of impact on the way I'm working and seeing things.
So you had that creative freedom to explore, I suppose.
Yeah.
For me, I've noticed that you don't use a lot of color, actually, especially when you're doing your comics, at least. Is there a reason for that? And I mean, what does the use of color mean to you?
So initially, I started with no color at all. It was just black lines on a white paper. So that was the intention. But now I've started to use a little bit of color, and I'm just experimenting it with different styles to see how it feels to people. So I have realized that in certain comics, there is no color except for like there will be like this heart shaped balloon, and that would be the only thing that would be colored. Or there would be like plant, and that would be something that has the rest of them would be like in grayscale. By doing so, I feel like I'm giving focus towards that particular element and the value that it stands for. The latest comic that I've made, right? I've used colors a lot on the trees and the plants, and I wanted to show growth. I felt like using color is doing justice to that statement. So that is how I'm looking at color.
That's cool. Yeah, I can see you really kind of, I suppose, evolved with your use of color, which is really nice to see.
This episode with
Yeah, I'm
Anand.
not sure though.
And
Like,
perhaps learn a thing or two.
sometimes it feels
For me,
like, okay,
I
this
learned
is
that
Creative
good
reps
without
are
any
actually a
use of
good thing,
color, or
and
sometimes it
we
feels like,
should
okay,
go
this
with the flow
is the black and
and
white
not
is
to
much
force
better
things
than
when
color
it
option.
comes
This
to our
communicates well.
artwork.
Why do I have
But thank
to
you so much
use
for
color?
listening,
Can I
and I'll see you
communicate the
on the next
message
episode.
without the use of any color? Sometimes I feel like adding color would add more layers and therefore add more meaning to it.
So you mentioned before that you notice how people react to your use of color in your work. So do you think that you use people's feedback to influence your work, especially on Instagram?
I experiment with it. Like recently, I made this comic talking about growth and do we really need to grow up? And I initially made that purely in black and white, following strictly what Apupas stand for. Then while I was making that, I had this thought that, maybe I should do this in color. But I guess at that point of time, I was lazy and I was really excited about the story as well. I wanted to put it out. I was excited to show the story. So I just put it out as a black and white comic. Then later on, I thought, like, you know what, let me try a colored version and see how people are reacting to it. I get feedbacks based on how many, how many people are liking the post. Not really with, I don't think Instagram would act as a medium for critical feedback as such. But I guess along with people's opinion, it is I'd have to like kind of make an opinion about it myself, right? So when I do that, when I'm comparing two artworks, one is color and one is without color, I feel like, okay, like, I like the colored one better. Maybe I should do more of that. Let me try. So it helps me grow as a person, trying and experimenting more with different styles and different techniques and of making the whole comic.
So it's basically a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see that from your Instagram, you have certain different styles.
Yeah. At one point, I was making only these comics, I felt like I was, boring people with these characters and stories. And I thought, like, maybe I should do something different. That's when this other character, kind of popped into my head. And so that character has a lot of color. So that has a lot to do. I mean, I'm using a lot of color and everything over there. With that character, I thought I'd explore color and see how that goes.
So it's like Apupa grew up.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. Where did the name come from, actually?
Apupa is a Malayalam word for grandfather.
So it's interesting that you've termed this small character as grandfather.
Yeah, I mean, it also sounds kind of cute, like that word. And when I was a little kid, whenever I used to go and visit him, he knew only one story, or maybe he knew more stories, but he would only say this story of this crow and how it drank water from that pot by putting stones in it. But it was something that he always did, and it got all our cousins together, and we used to like just, I don't know why we listened to it, but then we did anyways. I don't know. I guess that also had a little bit of influence to the name. I really admire him as a person, my grandfather. So I guess that had something to do with the name too. Or it's also like if you split that word, it would read as Apupas. So it's so this guy is kind of making fun of all the silly situations that we get ourselves into. So that's also another story with the name.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I like the childhood connection, actually. Maybe, I don't know, maybe subconsciously that's why you've kind of drawn it in a childlike way.
Yeah, and he used to encourage me a lot as a kid, like to draw more. He never scolded me for drawing on his walls. Like, in fact, he kept them like that for a really long time until my uncle decided to get married and then they wanted to get the whole house repainted. That was really heartbreaking for me. We used to have this rice mill business, and he used to keep my drawings in the shop. So people would come and ask who did this, and he would proudly say that it's my grandson's work.
Wow, I can see he's been a big influence in your life.
Yeah. He passed away. So probably, I don't know. I feel like this is like a thank you.
That's sweet. Yeah. So I suppose that's your kind of inspiration. We've talked about all that. Of course, your work that we see on your Instagram, at least, is mostly digital. So do you start straight away on digital, or, how do you capture your ideas from your head to manifest it in real life?
So yeah, as you said, like it starts with an experience, and I'm a person who overthink. Like even if it's something small, I keep overthinking about the situation, and then make it so big that I can't carry it. Then I kind of I start writing about it. I start writing about the whole experience and what and how it made me feel. From the writing process itself, I kind of what like this is an interesting idea for a comic. Maybe I should make it. So then I start sketching, and I would draw these characters talking to each other, or maybe even thinking about it. I would start with a sketchbook. It need not even be sketchbook. I remember sometimes I get these ideas and draw them on newspapers or whatever I find around, ballpoint pen or pencil, or I start sketching them first. Then once I feel like this is what something that I want to show, then I would turn into my laptop. And as of now, I'm using the Affinity Photo to draw. Earlier, I was using Photoshop.
So you go from a physical or like a traditional art process to the digital process.
Yeah.
Who do you go to for artistic inspiration? And how do you use that inspiration as well?
Yeah. So there are a lot of artists who kind of inspire me. I can't do justice by talking about only a few of them, but they're not just, like painters or digital artists. There there are poets that I really admire. Then there are writers, and there are traditional painters. There's this guy called Miles Johnston. I think he goes by the Instagram handle Miles Art. Almost all his illustrations and art that I see is very dark and very
It's very kind of surrealist fantasy.
it's a surrealist dark
Yeah,
fantasy. So
moody.
I don't know
Yeah.
what words to use, but whenever I see his artworks scrolling through Instagram, I can really feel it. Like there is this artwork of his where this person is falling into a canvas, and I keep looking at it. I wish I had that painting in my room, but I'm not that rich to buy, guess. So
One day.
one day, yeah, for sure. So whenever I see that, I feel that fall, like the escape and everything that is represented in that painting. Most of his artworks are very dear to me. There are other artists, like, there is this artist called Worry Lines, and among all of these artists, right, I fall for their genuinity in their work. I think like it's almost like I can see that person through this art, and I could like really relate to that artwork, and that is something that I want to, or at least I try to kind of represent through my art. Like I want to be like as real as possible and show people like the real side of things, and not just I don't want to like pretend and be like someone else. Like this is me, and this is what I want to tell you. So that's what I see in all these artists' work, and that is something that I want to have in my own work as well.
I think you do a good job of it, because when you were speaking about the genuinity, if that's the right way of saying it, of the artists whom you admire, I was thinking about how I feel that from your work. So I think it's working.
Oh, thank you.
How do you learn and improve your craft?
So I was actually talking about learning and improving my art recently. I was actually having a meltdown about it because I don't really sit down and kind of, I think everyone's doing 3D art and stuff. Maybe I should start learning something about that so I could do well and get more work. But then I decided to, okay, learn. But that process wasn't really working for me, sitting down to like just learn the software as such, or learn a particular technique. How I learn is, let's say I want to make a piece of art, and that art involves creating a texture of water reflections, right? And I don't know how to create that using Illustrator or Photoshop. So then I kind of, have to go to YouTube and look at, okay, how to make this, how to make that. And then I learned that process. And in that process, I learned so many other things about different tools and functions and all of that. So that is what drives me, I guess. I guess it all depends on what kind of art I want to make and what the message I want to show. So I feel like that seems to be working for me. So I try to keep myself engaged, making something or the other every day, or at least like every few days, push myself. And I'm more towards like improving how I see things. 5 years back, I wouldn't be seeing, let's take love. Like 5 years back, I wouldn't be seeing love the same way as I'm seeing it now. I feel like that is something that I would want to focus, improving the thought process of how we see things. And that kind of helps me, learn and move forward, I guess.
So it's more of an introspective process than it is necessarily a creative process.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah.
No, I think that's a good point, because even I completely understand what you're saying, because there's so many creative disciplines, and I think as designers or artists we feel that pressure to, we need to learn this new thing and this new thing in order to stand out, but perhaps all we need to do is just improve on what we are good at.
Just try to look at things and see things in a different way, different light. I guess that itself kind of will push you to look for solutions, and that would lead you to learn more things.
All right, I think we'll move straight to the last question that I had, which is a question that I've asked everyone that I'm interviewing. And that is, remember a time you were stuck in a deep creative rut. So when you were stuck creatively, how did you break free?
That is something that I find myself occupied with most of the time. Like, I make something and post it. And then after that, I'm in that whole process of, okay, what should I make next? And oftentimes I'm like always lost, okay, what do I do and what should I make, what is the message that I want to tell people. I remember telling a friend once that, just to like keep making stuff, don't think about the impact or anything, but just keep making. And that is something that I've started doing. Earlier I think about, okay, today I'm talking about loss, right? Tomorrow what should I be talking about? And then I fall into that rut, and it'll take like a long time for me to like come out and stuff. But lately what I've been doing is I take a random object, like, like a brush or a pencil, and I start making a comic with that. That would be like my constraint. I have to have a brush or a pencil in that comic, and I would make it because I'm not really thinking about what message I want to do, but subconsciously it's always along those lines. It will be like on the same theme with the rest of the stories. So yeah, so I would just say, like, just keep doing stuff. That's what I do. Like, I keep making things with whatever I have around me. So that kind of helps me. Sometimes like even taking a break helps from drawing itself. I try to shift it into like walks or going for a drive. I remember I was in this rut once, and I was talking to this friend of mine. Like, we were talking about something, and it gave me an idea to make a new comic. So this whole rut thing, it's a part of the process. I feel like for all artists, like, we have to be there to kind of come up with new stories, new art. So instead of seeing it as an enemy, we should kind of make it our, best friend and make use of that situation. Being in that rut phase allows me to kind of explore more. Yeah, it's a good thing. I feel now I'm like, okay, it's like I'm in that phase now. Let me go and try something new or different that I haven't tried before. So it gives space to explore. It should be seen as a good thing. That is what I feel, at least.
That's kind of like blown my mind, because I've never thought of a creative rut in a good way. So what you've said has just really, I guess it's made me think of the other perspective, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, maybe I should start making a comic about creative rut. See, like I'm having a conversation with you and having an ideas about making a new comic. So
Yeah, that's life imitating art, imitating life.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's all my questions. Thank you so much, Anand. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Anand and perhaps learned a thing or two. For me, I learned that creative ruts are actually a good thing and that we should go with the flow and not to force things when it comes to our artwork. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.